Jeff, I want to pivot to one thing that you said, which really kind of like had my ears perk up during the conversation with Preston, is that we're in the kind of final stage of fiat currencies, in particular, kind of the reign of the U.S. dollar. This is something that Luke Groman was also talking about in a couple different podcasts that he did, which I'm sure you agree with me. It's been one of the best kind of thinkers around this whole like
Mhm.
Russia situation, but. How do you think through that thesis of us kind of being in the final stages of fiat currencies, and how long do you think that process is going to take? Like, just kind of walk us through how you kind of foresee that kind of playing out.
Yeah. So first of all, when I on Preston's show, I said final days. I meant from a big macro perspective, like we're in the end times, but this could take years to decades, and it probably will take decades. So the way I look at it is a couple of things. I think the foundations in the US dollar as being the world's reserve currency are clearly crumbling already. It's starting to dissipate and it's starting to decrease as the major player. Other things are rising. The second most popular is the Chinese yuan. I think China in general is on the up and up, and the US is on the decline. And so at some point, there's going to be a transition point where kind of they take over as the world's major power. That's a little bit far off of what we're talking about. I do think China, Russia, and their allies have intentionally been they saw what is coming. They realize that when they buy crazy amounts of US treasuries, that they're actually funding the US war machine, and it's to their detriment in many ways. And they're funding and supporting the US petrodollar system. So way back in 2014, they decided they're not going to continue buying US treasuries at the same level they were, and so they've been decreasing that ever since. Who picked up the slack? The Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve has been printing money and monetizing the debt. So the US is buying the debt of the US, and that doesn't really work out, as everybody knows. You can't buy your own debt and pay it off. At some point, the victim is the US dollar and the purchasing power of the US dollar. So the people who hold the US dollar, us, the US citizens, and people around the world who own the US dollar, we're getting rapidly devalued. Our purchasing power is going down. I think if you look out about 10 years from now, I see three major currencies. So we have tons of currencies, tons of smaller government fiat currencies right now. I think they're going to coalesce. One by one, these smaller currencies are going to experience hyperinflation, and people are going to kind of panic, as anybody would, and move that purchasing power into one of the big three. So the US dollar, the Chinese yuan, and Bitcoin. And I think over time, 10 years from now, say, those are basically going to be the only three currencies that matter. I don't know what kind of proportion they're going to have. It's going to be interesting to watch too, because as Bitcoiners know, we don't really need these fiat currencies as a medium of exchange. If we have the Lightning Network, and there's going to be obviously more and more and better tools at that point to use Bitcoin, we really don't even need the fiat currencies. So I think the government fiat currencies, though, are going to try really hard. I think China and its allies are going to try to wall off Bitcoin and have their own CBDCs, have their own ecosystem where they're totally in centralized control. I'm waiting to see what the US does, but I really hope, obviously, we go down the Bitcoin route. I would like to see in the next several years us starting to include Bitcoin as a reserve asset to strengthen the US dollar. I think that's one way that we could add tons of life to the dying US dollar as well. And then all of the other currencies, including even I think the euro and especially the Japanese yen, which has been kind of a major staple currency, a strong currency for decades and decades and decades. I think that's probably going to mostly go away and be irrelevant 10 years from now. And the reason why I have such a fast time frame on that is because Bitcoin is increasing exponentially. It's growing exponentially. And so it's just going to start absorbing all of these other currencies and all of that purchasing power in the next 10 years. So I just think we have a very, very different world 10 years from now when it comes to currencies.